Well, welcome. Thank you all for coming. My name's Joey. I am a technical architect out of the Denver MTC. So I work for Microsoft. I've been there about 2 years. And my role is just to help customers envision what they can do, learn about our tools and technologies, and then help execute on that moving forward. I happen to work with HashiCorp quite a bit. And by the way, after this talk, depending on how much I ramble and how far we go, I'll try and save some time for questions. But I'll probably sit about the next hour at the HashiCorp booth. Their booth number 2013. I have it on the last slide. But if you want to come up after, as they're setting up for the next session, I'll meander over there. Just so you know, if you walk down the hallway, it's your first left, and then they're on the right, probably about 70% of the way down. So as I said, I work for the Microsoft Technology Center in Denver. We're an organization that's dedicated to doing those things, like I said, through lots of different engagements with customers. So we bring people in, usually 1 to 3 days, into often a room like this. We have envisioning centers that are kind of a little bit nicer versions of these at every single MTC in the world. There's 16 of us in the US. There's about 50, 60 across the world. But we help with high-level briefings, envisioning sessions, architecture design sessions. We were talking a lot about Service Hubs earlier because they're really great to work with. The MTCs are loaded with Service Hubs. We're probably the #1 user of them on the planet because we do just architecture whiteboarding, probably like 80% of the time. And then we also do things like POCs. Can you come in? We'll host hackathons, things like that. So we have facilities all over the world. Like I said, you can see the list. We also do all of our data center tours. So if you're ever interested, and it used to be a lot easier, but if you have a really, really good need for it, you can actually tour Azure data centers. So the MTCs actually facilitate those too. So we're a huge worldwide presence, really, really tight network of people that have a strong background in whatever their field is. So my background's in software development. I managed dev teams, was a software architect, built out a lot of things focused on IoT, done everything from mobile development, web development, front-end desktop applications, IoT, all kinds of things like that. But I'm one slice of the MTC, so I focus on app dev. We have people that focus on infrastructure, modern workplace, dynamics and power apps, and then data. And so anything that you would want, the MTC can really help with. So if you have some interest in coming in, seeing one of the MTCs in your city, there's not one here. There's not one in Orlando. Though I said I'm from Denver. I've only been in Denver 2 years. I'm actually from Orlando, so it's nice to be back home. So thank you for all coming to visit me at home. But yeah, so if you see your name on the list, like I said, these slides will be up on there later. You have some interest in coming in. Certainly you can come up to see me, anybody else, and there's some blue MTC jackets floating around. You'll see people throughout here the day. Everyone that presents in here is an architect at one of the MTCs around the world. So some of us are from the US, most of us are actually from somewhere else. So I always like to level set modern development conversations with a little bit about what DevOps is. And I know I'm talking about keys and secrets and Vault, but all of this comes from things starting to change across our ecosystem. We were kind of joking earlier that sometimes when I talk to the ops folks that are a little bit curmudgeon-y, and we were talking about infrastructure as code, and things are hard to change, and the devs are like rocketing forward with no concern for anything being secure. And all of these teams starting to merge, these philosophies starting to change, has put us in a place where we need really a better tool set to solve some of these problems. So DevOps is the union of people, process, and products to enable continuous delivery of value to your end users. That starts with people for a reason. A lot of people want to come in and they want to talk about DevOps, they want to talk about products, they want to talk about automation. And I always see DevOps as like a pyramid where products are at the top. You can be using something like Azure Pipelines, which we'll talk about today. But if you're using Jenkins on-prem, Travis, Circle, whatever, it doesn't really matter. You're helping automate whatever your process is. But if that process sucks, then you're just causing conflict really, really fast. And that process is built on people. So when we talk about DevOps, I always think of it as a philosophy around people working together. It's how do we build a product? Sometimes dev means software development. Sometimes it's data. A lot of data folks don't like to think they're programmers, but they're spending all day writing Python. You're programming. So looking at how we can take things like that and in a more modern cloud ecosystem, merge it together. It's so much easier to deploy than it used to be. It's so much easier to build out infrastructure, build out environments, build out databases. There's so much less to manage that we're starting to see all these teams come together to say one set of responsibilities for my entire product development is on just the team. So everything from coming up with the idea, which product management, really it's part of the development process, to building, testing, maintaining, deploying, monitoring, and then receiving feedback all the way back to product. Can we put all those people together? And that's become Microsoft's philosophy for how we do a lot of software development. Most of our teams are these cross-functional teams with lots of different people with lots of different backgrounds, all working together to deliver business value every sprint. Well, when that happens, oftentimes we've got people that had a very, very strong security focus. For years, they've been building these kind of moats around everything, putting lots of practices in place. And now we're trying to go really fast, and we've got developers in the same spot. And sometimes that can cause some conflict. And that's something that we need to find a way to work through and work around. And this is, when I talk about Vault, one of the tools that I think can significantly help for some of that. But I want to talk a little bit about why DevOps first. My slide will advance. So people want to embrace DevOps because it makes us go faster, right? But not just like a little bit faster. So if I just take a look at putting automation tools in place, and I'm going to automate my existing process, might get a little bit easier. But if I really start to embrace the culture, 46 times faster deployment frequency. These are some amazing stats to me. And actually, this slide is kind of old. This is from like a year or two ago. I'm sure this has gotten even better. 2,000% faster lead time for changes. 7 times lower change failure rate. So we're not actually building better software as a developer. I'm not writing better code. If anything, I'm probably writing worse code because I'm really confident in my pipeline being able to validate that it does what it's supposed to do. So I can move fast, I can break things, but I'm not breaking things in production. I'm breaking things early on. And I've put guardrails together to ensure that as a developer, I'm not going to accidentally leak out something like a key or a secret. Gone are the days of taking my secrets and committing them in my repo and pushing them up, hopefully. But I know some of you out there are still doing it. And so this is a reason why a lot of people really want to embrace some of these tools and technologies, some of these mindset shifts. All right, my pen is totally useless. So DevOps runs on trust. As I said, people is the main focus. If you grab a lot of DevOps books, they don't start talking about technologies at all. Even shout out to Emily Freeman, just put together a great book, DevOps for Dummies, probably the best DevOps book to come out in a while. The first few chapters are all about people, all about trust, all about communication. But how do we build some of this trust? It's not implicit. It's not just going to come from saying, I trust you now, and you can do whatever you want. So as a developer with no security experience and no background, I'm not suddenly going to give you my keys to production because we trust each other. I need to build something in place to help enable that trust, to help enable, yeah, I'm going to let you move as fast as you want, but we put some guardrails in place to make sure that you can't make mistakes. And that's how, when you saw that statistic about lower failure rates, we can put guardrails in place to make sure we don't make any mistakes going forward. And Vault becomes a really big tool for some of those things. So I have a confession. I have done some horrible, horrible, horrible things with keys and secrets. Who else has? Anyone else? So committed them to repos. Actually, one of my old companies, we had some PKI certificate roots on a USB flash drive that maybe sat in my desk for a couple months. And I gave them to our IT guy, who put them in his secure place in his office, which was a Home Depot shed that was made out of plastic, and you could just pull the door open if it was locked. Now, what's this? Sorry, let me see if I can plug this back in. All right, I just won't touch it. Yeah, I've done some horrible things with managing keys and secrets, and with that kind of stuff, you might be like, well, why am I listening to this guy? and I'll actually say I have very little knowledge over what the right process is to manage keys and secrets when I have to hold them. If you give me passwords, and you tell me that I need to securely keep them physically somewhere. I don't know what the process is. Put them in a bank vault, maybe. But as a developer, I don't really want to worry about any of that. I don't want to touch keys. When I managed dev teams, the last thing that I wanted was credentials to my production database. I might need to use production sometimes. I might need to deploy to it. Might need to make changes to it. But I don't actually ever want to touch it. I can't imagine the life of a DBA running scripts in production all day. Like, the level of stress is crazy to me. And so managing all these things that, every time a person has to touch, we're adding risk, gets really, really scary. Every time a person has to touch anything, we're putting the company at risk. If a person even starts to see what keys are, there's a little bit of risk. Some of these things, like if a password exists, it's not as secure as it could be because it's something to lose. If you don't have something to lose, or if you don't have something that is valuable for a very, very, very short time to lose, then that puts risk at the entire company, because there's some vector, even if you try and safeguard as much as you can, you never know what the next thing that's going to happen is. You never know what the next attack vector is. You never know if somebody on your team suddenly is going to be not trusted. And so can we start to find some tools to make those problems go away? And then can we take those tools and can we put them as part of our automation process? Can we leverage them together so that as a developer, I can build out this really, really robust pipeline that securely accesses secrets, securely generates secrets, or does things in a way that it's totally blind to me, where I never see the secrets at all, but I can still leverage it as part of my deployment process, as part of my automation process to get my application out. And so my application is always running in a secured manner, even though as a developer, I don't have access to anything. And so that's one of the tenets of where Vault starts to come into play. So who here is using some kind of key management system? All right, almost everybody, so that's good. If you didn't raise your hand, you should. There's a lot of different products out there. So of course, within Azure, we have Azure Key Vault. Any show of hands for Key Vault, I would guess it's a good chunk of those people. It's a great key value and certificate store. It can do some generation for you. It can do lots and lots of different things. But in the end, it's a pretty simple service. A lot of key management systems are basically just fancy key value stores. And Vault starts like that. Vault has a really fancy key value store. Vault's a independent, third-party distributed key management system. I'm not going to give you the full rundown on all the features of Vault. If you really want to dive into Vault and Vault Enterprise and see demos, certainly go talk to the HashiCorp folks. But a lot of the time the conversation comes up of people that want to live in the mentality of I own my infrastructure, I own my keys, or maybe I'm a multi-cloud service. If you're in AWS or if you're on-prem, you might not want to reach out to Key Vault running in Azure. And so one of the things that Vault brings is the ability to say, can I do distribution? Can I have instances running in multiple data centers, some stuff on-prem? Can I have everything synced together? Can I have it all work the same? And then as a developer, just get one endpoint to be able to get anything that I would need. And so Vault does have secrets management, and it does have this robust distribution capability, but it also does some other really cool stuff. So some of the things like encryption. So if I have to encrypt data, I generally need encryption keys. And so if I've got some kind of application that's encrypting images, that's encrypting whatever, any kind of data that would want to come through, I usually need access to those keys. But one of the things that it does is to say, can we help remove that from part of the process? So can it do encryption as a service? And so I can write out to Vault and say, hey, I've got this thing. This is really protected. This is very important to me. Can you hand me back what it looks like encrypted? And so I can pass that on. And if I need to decrypt it, I can hand it back off to Vault, prove who I am through probably a dozen different ways. They have lots and lots and lots of different options for identity, and we'll see in a minute what some of those are. But can I prove that this is me through whether it's an Azure Active Directory access token or an actual token, usernames, passwords, all kinds of different things, Kerberos tokens, things like that. And then based on that identity, get things decrypted, where I never hold the keys. I just prove who I am. And so even within Microsoft, we talk a lot about identity as the control plane. If you go to any of our security talks, that's things that we just ramble on over and over and over again. We're starting to live in a world of more, and Vault's marketing will call it dynamic infrastructure. So you don't necessarily know where your application's running. And you shouldn't really care either. We've gotten to the point where we don't really care what data center it's in. We might care what region it's in. But many times we don't care what network it's running on. We don't care about any of those kinds of things. I just care about, are the right people accessing it in the right ways? And so when we talk about things like identity as the control plane, that's really becoming a tenet for how we do those things. So can I prove my identity and then can use that to get access to my keys? But better yet, can I use that to generate keys? Can I use that to find ways to get into my application that even if something was exposed, my risk vector is shrunk? And so one of the big things that Vault does is the idea of dynamic secrets. So if I'm just going to get a key, and I'm going to put that key in my application, now that key lives 2 places. And so I'm also using my application as a store. And so there's SDKs out to be able to reach out to Vault. And the same thing with Key Vault. If you use the Key Vault SDK, you can pull them directly into your application. But they're still running in memory. They're still long-lived. Sometimes I want to do things that are much, much faster. So like, I want to go deploy to Azure. I got to grab service principal keys to go send something up to Azure. Well, the default service principals that I create, they're good pretty much indefinitely. Most people use the Azure CLI and AZAD SP create, and you get keys that are good forever, or good for a year, or some very, very large vector. Well, one of the things that Vault does is the idea of dynamic secrets. So it has a whole bunch of different engines that are part of it, and I can say, I need a key to Azure. I have proven my identity to Vault. Vault actually has, as part of the provider, rights to talk to my Azure subscription and generate me a service principal. And it's going to give me a service principal that's good for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. And then I can use that as part of the Vault API in my pipeline to go do things, like a deployment. And so every time I do my deployment, instead of leaving my keys somewhere not necessarily insecure, but somewhere that there might be risk, the more places that you store your keys, the more risk vectors there are. If I can get everything concentrated into one highly secured service that all of my developers can use, now it becomes really easy to reach out and say, I need a key to this, or I need a key to that. One of the big things that I'll show you a little bit later is how do we do this with databases. So my application needs a long-lived token to the database. It needs to be able to read and write things. It doesn't need to be able to drop tables. It doesn't need to be able to create tables. It doesn't need to be able to drop the database. It might only be able to access certain records. It might only be able to access certain schemas. But oftentimes we wind up in a place where we've granted our application rights to do everything. And that's actually kind of scary. The only thing that should have rights to do everything is really when I'm doing my database migrations. So, whenever I'm actually doing a deployment. And so can I reach out to Vault and say, hey, I'm proving that I'm your CI/CD pipeline. Can you give me a token that gives me everything? But how long do migration scripts take? Like 10 minutes? So can you give me a 15-minute access token to my database? And then I don't have to worry about storing it. I don't have to worry about keeping it secure, because as soon as the deployment's done, it's gone. And so we can use Vault to dynamically generate a lot of these different things to make it easier to have that trust. So here's an example of a lot of the different key value stores and engines that they have built into Vault just right out of the gate. It is fairly extensible. The first one, KV, it's a key value store. Makes it really easy. I store secrets, I get secrets, everything's static. Not a big deal. Same thing that everybody else offers, what you would expect. But PKI, so I came from a company that did IoT. When I mentioned storing some of those certificates, storing root certificates on a thumb drive that you put in the bank, okay. It's a little bit scary, right? Who has access to the Vault? Is that flash drive good? How many copies do you make? What's the right number to make sure that it's okay? How many banks do you put them in? I don't know. That's a really hard thing to do. So one of the things Vault can do is generate X509 certificates. So you can give it a root, or better yet, give it a root and let it generate intermediate certificates, and then don't use the root for anything, but keep those intermediate certificates there, and then have it sign things for you. Have it generate certificates for you. So if you're in a public key infrastructure where every single service, every single device, everything that you have has public and private keys, if you have to generate those yourself, that means you have to hold the keys. But if I can let Vault generate those keys, I never see them. They never leave Vault. They never leave it ever. It stays completely locked up. The only time that you can actually get those is when you first go to generate. That's the only option for export. After that, you can never see the private certificates again. Which means as long as you're in an environment where your Vault is highly protected and highly backed up, there's no risk to expose it because nobody can get to it except for the software that's running. Some of the other things too, SSH keys. How many people have SSH keys on random servers that you probably, for companies you don't even work for anymore? Yeah, there's definitely a number out there. I know that I know the patterns and practices of some of the places that I've worked in the past. I guarantee you I've got keys floating around somewhere that get me root access or sudo access on some machine. That's a huge risk for the company. Now, I'm trustworthy, but is everybody? And so one of the things Vault can do is to say, can I help that management for you? Can you give me access to your machines, and I'm going to generate you keys, and then I'm going to make sure those keys aren't good for that long. So you can get just-in-time access to services through a programmatic matter. Some of the other things, so Transit is Vault's encryption engine. So if I want to do that on-the-fly encryption that I was talking about, where Vault manages your keys to encrypt with, it'll do that for you. TOTP, so time-based one-time password. If anybody uses an authenticator app that's got those rotating keys, a lot of times people want to add two-factor. So they're like, I'll use something like TOTP. I install the SDK for it, and I put stuff in my database, and I'm really just putting the TOTP keys to generate those codes in my database. Yeah, they're not passwords, but people tend to not always protect them with the same level that they should. Can I remove those keys from my system entirely? And so can I keep those in Vault? And so Vault has those keys, but nobody actually ever has access to get it. I deliver them to my user as a QR code right at the very beginning, and then I never see them again. So from generic secrets, there's a whole bunch, but it also has engines for a lot of other things. So like I mentioned Azure for doing service principals, AWS, GCP, Ali Cloud. It actually even has a plugin for on-prem Active Directory to be able to say, hey, as a user account, if I need to get access to something and I want a just-in-time user account, can you give me a user account that has a password that I know is going to be rotated out in an hour? And so can I get access to my on-prem resources as some user that has elevated privileges or whatever privileges I need with all the roles that I need just for the time that I need it? And so can I do that from an easy, just like one command? And then, of course, infrastructure. So Consul is a service mesh, among other things, from HashiCorp. Nomad is kind of a, I don't want to call it a competitor to Kubernetes, but an orchestration system. RabbitMQ for message queues, databases, it supports MySQL, Postgres, Azure SQL, a lot of the major SQL databases for doing that just-in-time access to databases to be able to go generate credentials. So lots of different really, really cool things that you can do in a really, really easy manner. I think that's the key. The Vault SDK, there's really only two commands for it, read and write. And so I read from a path, and that path would be like if I'm using the key value engine, it's like /secret/data/ whatever it is. If I want to write, I write to secret data, whatever it is. If I want to encrypt, I write to transit. And so it becomes a really, really easy to use application with a really robust API to be able to call into all these engines to read and write from all these different kinds of data. And it's free. So you can install Vault right now. It's all open source. Everything HashiCorp does. Everything has a nice free open source version, well supported. You can go out of the code. You can see everything that you would want, which is, to me, incredibly important. Being able to see the code that you're executing to manage your secrets, that's something that is really important to a lot of customers. Certainly, you should be able to put your trust in a company like Microsoft, but you can't go get the Key Vault source code. That's a requirement for some people to say, I want all my key management in the same place, and I want to be able to audit everything. I want to be able to see every single line of code. And so can I go compile all that, run it on my own hardware, run it totally isolated, and so I have full confidence in it. I don't only trust the vendors, but I trust my people to go audit it. But of course, they're a company, and they got to make some money. So they have some enterprise tools. So Vault Enterprise is a tool that you can go talk to them a lot more about. But it adds being able to collaborate. So how do I, of course, have, I've got role-based access control and policies in Vault open source, but can I get a really, really robust set of ways to be able to share things through namespaces? Be able to share things with developers who need that specific access, open up different authentication providers so I can get in with my Azure Active Directory logins. And so as a user, I can get the keys that I need, and I can manage the keys I need without having to worry about issuing keys for other people manually. Disaster recovery and namespaces, being able to back up those keys. So if you put everything in Vault, you got to make sure Vault is running, right? If you lose your Vault, that's pretty bad because you can't get into a lot of those keys, so there's nowhere to back it up. So can you set up disaster recovery? And then can I also have policies for scaling? My keys that live in the US might be keys that are different than my keys in Europe because they're access to different databases. I don't want to just replicate the same thing everywhere. I only want certain pieces of data to live in certain locations. And so can I build robust policies to say, auto-replicate across the world, but only do it with things that make sense? And so if you want to get really robust, this is what a full, highly available Vault deployment looks like. They've got a lot of tools to make this easier. But using some kind of service mesh, service discovery tool, in this case they're using Console, you can deploy Vault on AKS really easily. You can use Vault as a key management store for AKS really easily as well. But can I deploy this in multiple regions, multiple data centers, let them all connect together, and then just have a single endpoint to get to my Vault, to be able to access my keys so I can do things in a really easy way? And again, I see people taking photos. Feel free, but I will put these online. All these slides should already be uploaded from the speaker deck, but I'll make sure any demos that I show, anything like that, is all available as well. And so as a client, I can reach into this highly available cluster. I can always get my keys and certificates, but I never have access to the really important data that's helping generate those things. And so if I can stick to things like dynamic secrets, I don't have to worry about ever exposing those credentials, because even if they did get exposed, they're probably not going to be good by the time somebody gets to them. So I want to show you a little bit of what it looks like. Shout out to the new Edge. Sorry, it switched from duplicate. Here we go. So this is Vault. Please ignore my highly insecure way of accessing it. This is a demo. Don't ever turn off SSO. From here, you can see my different secret engines that I have enabled. So Cubbyhole is just a little place to put secrets. So Vault generates an access token. Cubbyhole is specific to that access token. So anything you put in there is only ever for you, not for anyone else. Anyone else that has any logins won't see them. But I can see I've enabled key value stores twice. I have it under 2 different paths. I might want 2 fully isolated sets of key value stores. Totally possible. But I've got it generating SSH keys. I've got it generating service principals for Azure. I've got Postgres database set up and one-time password. I'm not using all these in an application, but it becomes really easy to come here and say, hey, I want to enable a new engine. Here's all the things I have to pick from. Can I set these up really easily? The Vault UI is really nice because if I want to go in and read something, I can actually do it right from here. So if I wanted to say, read secret data Ignite 2019, I'm authorized already. I've signed in. In this case, I'm using an access token. But there's lots of different ways to sign in. I can just grab my keys from here. This is what the command line feels like, or the API feels like. So I'm going to call get to the Vault API, and I'm going to get to secret data Ignite 2019. Or if I'm using the CLI, I'm just going to do Vault read secret data 2019. Whatever service I'm on, as long as I'm authenticated with Vault, will securely get me those things back. Same exact way that I want to do dynamic secrets. So I could do, in this case, I'm not using it, but I could do read /database/Postgres. And if I would have set up a role, I'd say read the role name. And what it's going to do is it's going to say, OK, when I go to read the role name, I need to get a rollback. So I need an access token to a user that's in that database with that role. And because I have policies all set up to say that that's OK, it's going to spit me back database keys. So Vault's really cool. Vault Enterprise has same UI, same API, just very robust collaboration features. I stood this up on a VM in like 20 minutes. It's one executable to install. You can stand it up in Kubernetes. There's templates for it. You can stand it up in Azure container instances. Any way that you would want. It's really, really easy. It can keep its secrets in a number of different places too. So you can, if you're in Kubernetes, eventually some of the stuff's getting dropped into config in like an etcd cluster. For me, I'm just keeping them on the VM because this is a demo and it's easy. But any way that you would want to set things up for your personal network configuration, for your security policies, you certainly can. So Azure Pipelines, who's using CI/CD tools? Hopefully everyone, almost everyone. If you're not, Azure Pipelines is, sorry. Doesn't like changing back and forth between screens. So Azure Pipelines is a CI/CD tool for Microsoft. If you are familiar with TFS, it was Visual Studio Online, it was Visual Studio Team Services, and there's Azure DevOps. We've rebranded a lot, same great sets of tools. But Azure Pipelines is a tool for deploying any language, any platform to any cloud. I can build on Windows, Mac, or Linux agents. I can run scripts. I can get a nice GUI to define what my applications look like, to define what my build processes look like, to drag and drop tasks, or I can just write scripts. A lot of people as a developer, I like having my infrastructure as code. I like having my pipelines as code. I like having a continuous way to be able to deploy my application in a good, reliable manner. And this becomes really important because as I go to deploy my application, depending on where I am in my application development process, I might not be to a full 12-factor app where configuration lives in the environment. I might be in a place where I have keys that I need to inject. I might be in a place where I have keys that I need during my deployment process. And so oftentimes one of the problems that comes through is to say, I'm writing out this pipeline, but I need access to things to be able to do things. And so how can I best take advantage of doing that securely? And so for a long time, we had a number of different best practices. There's certainly some of the things, if you're deploying to Azure and your applications all live in Azure, using things like managed identity, absolutely awesome. There's no keys. Nobody has any keys to anything. Your authorization is the environment that you live in. That's the ideal case to get to, but I don't know anybody that's fully there yet. Almost everybody has keys for lots of things. I've got an example running that's hitting Postgres. Postgres doesn't have any way to access like that. I need keys. I need usernames and passwords. So how do I get them as part of my deployment process? Well, one of the things about Azure Pipelines is that it's very extensible. So Azure Pipelines has a marketplace, and that's something that we've taken advantage of. There's a marketplace of tons of different community extensions and first and third-party extensions that have been added to do all kinds of different things. And there's actually some out there for Vault, but in a little bit, I'm going to show you a new one that makes things a little bit easier. And so as I mentioned, Azure Pipelines, we've got a nice GUI, build and release tasks. I can drag things through. I can figure out what my entire process is. Lots of pre-built tasks. In this case, I'm using Helm and ACR to go deploy to Kubernetes. I could easily be using an app service deploy. I'll show you a demo of that in a second. But anything that I would want to do to build or release my application, whether it's a desktop app, mobile app, web app, anything that I would want all together. It also has YAML. So as I said, infrastructure is code, configuration is code, build and release is code. So as a developer, this is how I write everything. I write code that defines my build steps, and I commit it to my repo. So within my repo, I have the same definition of how I build my app, how I release my app, what my infrastructure looks like, everything that I would need end-to-end to run everything. And in this case, we're going to add in how to use secrets. So let me flip over real quick and just show you what a pipeline looks like. And then I'll show you how to join them together. So this is not the screen that I'm showing. Sorry. Screen's finicky today. So this is actually part of the demo that I showed yesterday. I'm using Terraform. Terraform's another product from HashiCorp. Infrastructure as code. It's going to go deploy my application. Not my application. It's going to deploy my infrastructure. I'm using Terraform, initplan, and apply to go create an app service. So in this case, I have all my code here. I don't really need any keys here. It's just setting up my app service. But when I go to deploy, my app needs to talk to a database. And so I show this because this is what the classic editor looks like. This is great for diving through my application in a user-friendly manner, but I can also write the exact same thing as code. So in this case, I'm building my application, and I'm releasing my application to different environments, all configured as code. But Azure Pipelines and Terraform go really well together. Sorry, stuck on yesterday. Azure Pipelines and Vault go really well together. As I mentioned, having our keys as part of our deployment pipeline becomes really, really critical. I wind up in a place where I need these often. One of the things that happens to me all the time is people say, I'm talking about data ops, I'm talking about ML ops. I want to come in and take these DevOps processes and apply them to deploying all kinds of different things. Software developers are actually pretty good about keeping keys together. We're pretty aware of practices. We've been working with dev for a long time. When I get into like data warehousing, oh my God, it just goes all over the place. Because suddenly we've got people doing data science work that have never had to deal with any of these best practices. And so I'm doing ML that needs access to my data, that needs to be able to run all these things, but I'm just dumping keys in my code or saving scripts to my desktop. I've seen a number of data science teams come in, and I'm like, here's everything that I have, and it's just on a flash drive, and I hand it to somebody else. And we're just distributing keys like crazy. So how do I start to apply some of those things into pipelines to have these best practices to get away from these kind of things? And so today, I want to announce Vault for Azure Pipelines. So one of the big things that's come out, and I've seen a lot of feedback on, is we love to use Vault. We'd love to use Vault in pipelines. I don't want to use some random person's code. So from the Azure Marketplace, anybody can go submit an extension. There are some amazing community extensions out there that do so much stuff. A lot of them you can audit. Not all of them. Not everybody has their code public. Not everybody has things where you are. Not everything's by somebody that you might trust. And so some of the feedback we've gotten is to say, we'd love to be able to use Vault. We'd love to be able to use Vault in pipelines. We'd love to be able to use service connections within Azure DevOps to securely manage how we access Vault. And we want it to be by somebody that we trust. And so we've put together which is in preview today, private preview today, probably about a week. It'll be public preview. The guy that has to release it's in Ecuador, so he'll be back real soon. But we've put together a set of extensions for Azure Pipelines to be able to securely access Terraform in a really, really easy manner that's maintained and published by Microsoft and HashiCorp. So it'll be under the HashiCorp account. It can be something well trusted to be able to use these sets of tools in your pipeline with full confidence. Because Vault is so robust and so extensible and so easy to use, the API space is really, really easy. And so whether you're needing to access secrets, manage your secrets, encryption, decryption, any of those other engines, thankfully there's only a couple commands that you need. And so the extension's really, really simple, but managed by someone that you trust. And so I'd love to show you what that looks like today. So right now, I have an app service. In this case, this is an app service that I set up with that pipeline from yesterday. So, demo staging app. Just a really, really basic app, reaches out to a database. But I don't have keys to my database. There's a lot of different ways I can get keys, but in this case, my application needs a password. Well, let me look at this. Hello, Ignite. That doesn't really look like a password that's real. So let's go ahead and delete that and go ahead and save. So my application needs some kind of secret. But where does that secret live? Well, as an IT administrator, maybe I'm rotating keys by myself. And actually, that's another great feature of Vault, is that for a lot of different providers, you can set up keys to automatically rotate for you. And if I set up my application deployment to every time I deploy, grab the newest keys, key rotation becomes really easy. Because as long as I'm deploying semi-frequently, then I'm rotating my keys semi-frequently. And so a lot of compliance boxes can get ticked automatically by building this all into my process. As a database administrator, things like that, managing key rotation, making sure all your applications are up to date, that can be a real, real challenge. Where with setting up a process like this, in honestly just a couple clicks, I can have all my passwords auto-rotate and all my deployments automatically grab the newest version. And so as long as I'm updating my apps frequently enough, I don't ever have to worry about it again. So let's go into Vault and let's see what we have. So, let's come back under Secrets, and I have it under Secrets. And in this case, it's Ignite 2019. And so I've got my password, and I can show my password right here. Works nice. I can create a new version. So one of the other big things is version secrets. I might have two sets of passwords that are active at the same time. If you notice, even Azure does this a lot. If you go to a storage account, we almost always give you two keys. So you can rotate one of the keys, update your apps to the new key, and then once all your apps are updated, go roll that key. So you can always have access to things. Vault will also keep historical versions to say, I fat-fingered something, I gotta roll it back. And so let's give it a new password. So let's say our password is Ignite Demo 123. Go ahead and hit save. So I've saved this in Vault. It's nice and simple. And then I want to drop over to my pipeline. So in this case, I'm using the GUI editor. I'm more of a fan of YAML. I tend to write it, but honestly, it doesn't demo quite as well. So certainly would recommend to use YAML on your own. But can I just grab this password right now, and can I write that to my application? And so in this case, I've got a really simple version of just a deploy. So I'm using the .NET Core 3.0 SDK. I'm calling .NET Publish. I'm grabbing my Postgres credentials. So this is the Vault task. And all that I need to do is saying, hey, key vault get, and what's the path? And if you notice, this is using a service connection. So one of the things that we built in is to say, Azure DevOps can help manage keys for you to an extent. I don't want to necessarily give it access to do everything, but I might give it an identity that my Vault knows about. And so I've used Azure DevOps to manage a connection, and I can create a new one here if I would want, which will drop me into a place where I can pick how am I going to access Vault. Can I put in my Vault token? Can I put in my username and password? This is the only place where I'm really dealing with credentials at all, but they're just my credentials to get to Vault, which is a well-managed, well-audited system. That's one of the other great things that Vault has, is just a number of different ways to write out audit logs. So anywhere that you would want to go, anything that you would want to do within Vault, every time a key is accessed, every time a key is generated, is highly, highly audited. So I want to go ahead and kick this off. And what this is going to do, it's going to build and run my application. But before it does the deployment, it's actually going to reach out to Vault and say, hey, can I get a key? I need the key to my database. And my application's expecting that to just live in an environment variable, because that's how it's been for a long time. So can I actually set that as part of my deployment process? So as a user, I don't ever have any interaction with it. My IT administrator managed it, my database administrator managed it in Vault, and as part of my deployment process, I'm just going to roll that out. And so one of the things that this does is it grabs your keys from Vault and it sets them as variables within Azure DevOps so that I can use them further along in my pipeline. They don't exist anywhere else beyond that. That's the only time they come into play. And so here, as part of my application settings, I'm actually passing in the database password. So this takes a second or two to run. But once it comes up, we'll take a look at it. But what if I don't want a hard-coded database password? I mentioned one of the things Vault can do is actually go create database roles for me. Vault can actually talk to Postgres to give me something scoped. So I have this disabled here. But with just a really simple change to say, I want to read, and I want to read from database credentials, and then I've called the role DB migrate. So in my Vault configuration, I've pointed that to Postgres. And when I call this, it's actually going to reach out to Postgres, create a new user, with a scoped limit of access, with keys that expire very, very quickly, and then I can use that for my deployment. And so I can say, I want to make sure I deploy once a week, and my database credentials are maybe good for 2 weeks, because this is a highly secure application, and I want to make sure that it rotates often. You might do that for something long-lived. Oftentimes, I want to grant tokens that are a little bit longer for my application, but for doing deployments, I don't want my keys to last more than like an hour. And so being able to pull those in dynamically with just a couple changes here makes it really, really simple. So let's see if this is finished yet. Yep, just did. So if we look at the logs, we can see everything that's here. So grabbing my Postgres credentials, this is going to reach out to my database, grab my credentials, set them as variables, and then as part of my deployment, it's going to pass them in. Azure DevOps knows, hey, that's something secure, so I'm not going to see it. So if I come over here, hit refresh, I see it's been updated, and I've got my Ignite demo 123. So this is pulled as part of my CI/CD process from HashiCorp Vault, secrets in, set them as task variables, really easily added them to my next build step, and deployed it. This lets me have all the flexibility that I would want to do really, really robust CI/CD deployments. I can take this and I can do it to use TOTP credentials. Part of what I could be doing here is saying, I want to generate a user that has access to a VM that exists on-prem with Azure Active Directory, and then do something like one of my old deployment commands to reach out to that server using those credentials and update my old app running on IIS. But that user's only good for 20 minutes while I'm doing my deployment. And so I don't have to have the risk of saying, how do I manage identity from a cloud provider to things on-prem? Because I've got Vault there doing that access for me, making things easy for me. And so this becomes a really, really robust tool to be able to use in any environment, any cloud provider, to be able to have strong access to any of my credentials, any dynamic secrets. As I'm provisioning out new services, maybe the other thing I might do is to say, hey, this is a new service, it needs a new identity. Instead of reusing certificates, maybe I'm reaching out to the certificate provider to say, generate an X509 certificate for my application. And I'm going to give my app the private key, and I'm going to take the public key, and I'm going to go register it somewhere. And so anything that I would want, huge amount of flexibility, really, really robust, highly performant, extremely secure, and available as a nice task in the pipeline. So as I said, the task will be out in probably a week or two. For now, if you'd like to see it in the next couple days, go ahead to aka.ms and hit Vault Pipelines Preview. This is just going to be a form to fill out that says, give me your Azure DevOps organization name, and I'm just going to go share it with you so you can go ahead and set it up and give it a try. We're happy to collect feedback on it, but like I said, Vault is really, really robust, but an extremely simple interface to get through, so the tokens, or the tasks are actually really, really easy to use. If you've been using Vault, this will feel really natural, and then I can create my service connections, bless my pipeline with access to my Vault, so my developers never even have access to Vault, just my pipeline has access to Vault, and then that follows all those policies, so I can have all the best practices that I would want, hit all the compliance needs that I would want. So my name is Joey again. I'm going to walk over to HashiCorp booth 2013 right after this, so I'll stick around for questions for a little bit. But if you want to find me, at Joey Lorick, linkedin.com/jlorick, or if you can't remember that, I found out that this was open the other day, aka.ms/Joey, and so you can find me there. But thank you all for coming in. Certainly use key management systems, follow best practices. It will give you so much more trust in your developers moving forward. But yeah, thank you again.